Hey, how goes it? Ken Bozak here to talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin accessories. And today we're streaming with strangers. Our guest, I guess, hails from Asia. It appears it's Makoto Takamiya from Sora.org. Sorry if I butchered that name. Do correct me. Introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are. Maybe a little bit about where you came from and how you got into cryptocurrencies.
Okay, sure. So my name is Makoto Takemiya. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Soramitsu. So Soramitsu is a Japanese, I would say, boutique fintech company that is in Tokyo. It's about 11 p.m. here in Tokyo right now.
Oh, it's
Um,
9 a.m. here in New Jersey.
but I think the weather here is slightly better. There's no snow outside.
Yeah, rub it in. Go ahead. We don't have Godzilla, so I win. Whatever.
Gojira. But yeah, today actually was a national holiday. It's Japan's 2679th birthday. So
Happy
um,
birthday, Japan.
yeah, the founding. So today was a national holiday. Um, but just a little bit about what we're doing. So I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about a project called Sora. But before I talk about that, I'll give just a brief introduction. So I don't really look Japanese. I moved to Japan 11 years ago, and I originally worked at NEC to do machine learning for my master's thesis. And then after I graduated, I liked it so much that I moved to Japan and worked at a neuroscience research lab called ATR in Kyoto. And I liked Japan so much that I actually changed my name and became a citizen 4 years ago. So that's kind of
Congrats,
why,
man. That is
why I have a
awesome.
Japanese name. Um, I got into blockchain well through Bitcoin, the gateway drug, back in 2013 in January, I guess. And at that time, Bitcoin was around like $20 or $30 at the beginning, and then I was here in Japan, so it's pretty easy to buy on Mt. Gox and did some trading. I wrote a bot in Python to do some Bitcoin trading. That didn't turn out so well. Um,
Yeah, but how was that process, man? That must have been a pretty cool experience.
that's is interesting. It's then as it is now, it's really hard to predict the price, and it's hard to understand what the fundamentals are. Um, I don't think anyone can explain that
Yeah.
in a good way. But anyway, to make a long story short, after I became a citizen, I was able to live here in Japan without having, a visa. So I was able to quit my job and start a company. And the first company, kind of, you should fail fast and fail hard. And the first project I was part of, wasn't really a success with me as part of it. So I left that, and then I found a new team, and I created this company, Soramitsu, which we actually just celebrated our third-year anniversary last week. Um, so we've gone through a lot in the last 3 years, but what we're most well known for is a blockchain platform called Hyperledger Iroha. So this is an open source blockchain platform. So when people think about Hyperledger, they usually think about Fabric, which is one of the five platforms. So there's actually five different blockchain platforms in Hyperledger. Um, Fabric, Sawtooth, Iroha, Burrow, and Indy, and we created the third one, Iroha. So that's kind of our contributions to the world of open source, and we use Iroha for a few different platforms. So our main theme is the idea of creating a digital identity using blockchain and doing digital asset management on top of this. So the idea is that your digital property is it's yours by natural right, like the same as any other property that you have, and no one should be able to take that away from you. And unfortunately, a lot of people in many countries they don't have access to things like banking systems where you have some safekeepers that can take care of your assets and hold them for you. So really using blockchain technology, it's a way to digitize a lot of the assets and value that people have. So we we started, using vIRL for different applications. 2 years ago, the National Bank of Cambodia approached us and asked us to work on a settlement system for the country, and
Oh, cool.
that's one of the projects that we are working on. It's actually a really cool
So how
project.
how would they utilize blockchain technology? I'm sure they're not touching the actual assets of cryptocurrencies, but they're more so probably using it for the open source ledgers for tracking in and out transactions, things to that effect.
Well, actually, the National Bank wants to digitize fiat. So, they
So
have this.
digitized, but not crypto, right? Like they want to make a digital currency, not a cryptocurrency. There's a difference.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They want to create a digital currency that they control, because they are a central bank and they already have a currency that they control. Um, but they have physical money in their vaults, and you can create a 100% reserved currency based on this. So that's kind of what that project is about. And the cool thing is, we can we can put this digital money on someone's phone, and then they can use it just like you would use Bitcoin or any other you know cryptocurrency. Um, but the really cool thing is that even though the infrastructure is centralized, so it's using a private permissioned blockchain that the central bank controls by itself, the actual business logic is decentralized. So, like for example, the user's key is generated on the phone and it never leaves the phone. And so, um, even the central bank can't fake a transaction that someone does. So, it's a way to kind of move things in the right direction, where we're creating more decentralized infrastructure for global finance.
Would customers still have the same securities as they would if somebody were to access my funds and move them? Would I be able to do like a chargeback, or would companies have to worry about double spends in a sense?
So that's a very good question. So different use cases like this are still under consideration. It's best to have the simplest possible, thing that you can do. And uh, business rules like chargebacks really complicate a lot of logic. Like there's a lot of use cases that you can't do with chargebacks. And in Cambodia, the whole infrastructure is not really made for, digital money type of system or
Yeah, they're
credit
not going
cards.
to wait 3 days for the funds to clear.
Yeah, no, it's really like a cash-based society. Like people will get like a box of cash in order to go buy a car or a house. It's just really different from what we're used to.
So you've
Um,
worked on a lot of open source software. Have you ever considered like the fact that companies could just steal this because it's open source, try to tweak one thing in house and patent it, and now it's centralized? And I think about this a lot when we see a lot of these protocols come out when it's all open source, and I don't worry about other open source projects stealing it, like Litecoin's implementing private sends and they're stealing some of that from Monero or whatever. Whatever, that's the free market. But then I worry about the centralized market coming in and taking over some of these open source codes, protocols, and patenting them, and then trying to enforce their regulations accordingly.
well, I wouldn't say that the patents are the biggest fear. The biggest fear is that it's much easier to create a better user experience in a centralized system. And so just being crowded out of the market is a real risk that a lot of decentralized projects have. Um, but I think that's a short-term risk and not a long-term risk, because long-term, I think we're going to have solutions that are good for a lot of the user interface problems. So, like for example, some of what we're doing in Cambodia, it's not acceptable if you lose your phone, to lose your assets. So there has to be ways to recover, your assets in that case. And that's where banks can come in as intermediaries, where they can, you know, take a look at someone's identity, confirm it, and they can actually switch the keys out. It's a multi-signature account, and they're able to do some modification of the key pairs associated with some assets, but only under very strictly controlled conditions.
Hmm.
So that's one of I would say interesting and impactful projects that we're doing, because this can have a real impact on a lot of people's lives. Another really interesting project that we're doing that goes along the same theme of controlling my own assets myself is a project called D3, And D3 is a decentralized digital depository, and there's a cool website for it at d3ledger.com. But this is a project actually that was started 2 years ago by people at the National Settlement Depository of Russia, which is part of the Moscow Exchange Group. And they did, the first test, and then after the first year, they came to us and they said, we want to make this production system. We want to build it on Etherhawk. Can you help us? So we started working with them a little bit more than a year ago on creating this production platform. And in D3, you use Etherhawk as a private ledger, and then because most assets are not on this ledger, they're on like Ethereum or Bitcoin. We actually build a bridge, so it's a two-way peg between Bitcoin and D3 and Ethereum and D3, and we actually did a test with real money. There's some investment fund called Ad Capital that moved money into the system and then did some settlement between users.
So what would be some of the benefits of using a gateway or a bridge like that rather than just maybe an atomic swap of some sort when it's built a protocol?
Well, the idea really is to make a system where you can move assets between different chains. There's several reasons why this is nice. One is technology changes every few months, and so if let's say you do some ICO or something, you create a new token on Ethereum. Let's say, God forbid, that EOS takes over the world, and no one uses it. So at that case, you could actually move the asset from Ethereum onto the other chain. But it's really about being flexible with the technology. And in D3, because it's a private permission ledger, settlement times are very quick. You don't have to pay transaction fees and gas and things like that. It can be useful for many circumstances. Also, the main use case that D3 started as was as a custodial depository. So you can take your assets from Ethereum or Bitcoin and you can move it onto D3. And once you do that, it's not one party, but it's this whole system that manages your assets. So to withdraw the money, you have to get many different parties to sign off on it. The validators in the system. So it's very hard to hack this system. And all the validators are really licensed financial institutions. So the pilot that we did in October was run by Moscow Exchange Group and KDD, which is the CSD in Slovenia, and Nika, which is a crypto exchange in
So does D3 act as a DAO in a sense, like as a custodial for private keys, or is there still like a human element in the back end?
Yeah, there's still a human element such that the D3 platform itself is just technology. They don't deal with any clients directly. So, client service providers like a crypto exchange or custody service, they use this as a technological layer to provide the services to the users. And you can even use this for things like token issuance. So for things like STOs, this is really a perfect platform because it doesn't make sense to do a security token offering on a completely public ledger because there's so many restrictions that you have, with especially American security law, that it doesn't make sense to do a completely open system.
Yeah,
so
if you have to follow the regulations, you're definitely going to want to go that route. But if you don't care, you don't have to go that route. But I see what you're saying. You got to make sure that you're not releasing tokens to U.S. addresses and stuff like that. But what are your thoughts on the future of STOs then in this space? Because I feel like the ICO market, it's over, and the institutional investors want exactly what STOs are offering, but is it too little too late? What are your thoughts on the future of the security token market?
So in theory, STOs are very nice because they solve the two main problems of ICOs. One is the lack of regulatory certainty or clarity, and the other is the lack of accountability because you have some legal entity that's doing the issuance.
I'm sorry to cut you off. The audience said that your microphone is a little glitchy. I can kind of hear it a little bit. Do you have a different microphone you might be able to use?
Maybe I'm just too far from it. Is that better?
Might be, might be. Sorry,
Okay.
guys. They're so picky.
I'll try to not be here. Maybe I'll kind of move down closer. But
Yeah, no, I can hear it. It's just a little like gain. I can hear the high pitched little clicks. I don't know how to combat that, everybody.
I don't know what that would be. But is that better?
It's all right. I mean, it's not that bad. I hardly noticed it until I saw a few people say something. Get over it, Z Daddy. Sorry
I can
about that. So
keep mine.
so as you were saying, the future of the STOs.
So STOs really solve the two main problems of ICOs. One of which is the lack of regulatory clarity and then the lack of accountability. And so in theory, STOs could be quite successful in the long term. But one problem with practice is really the lack of liquidity caused by small trading volumes. So without an easier way to allow more people to come in and trade, it's really hard to get a lot of regular retail volume. That doesn't mean that you won't have institutions come in and buy assets. So this could be useful for banks, for example, to do things like credit default swaps or different types of derivatives and trading. But for retail to get into investing in new decentralized applications, it's really I'm a bit skeptical about the efficacy of it. In that case, you're probably better off doing something in a country with less restrictive guidance, such as Switzerland or Singapore. Would be my thoughts. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. So we're actually talking to some companies. One cool up-and-coming project is called Liquidity Digital, and they're doing some interesting things with trying to, I guess they don't call them STOs, but rather digital micro-security offerings and different things like that.
Well, even New York Stock Exchange has said they're going to be starting to look into blockchain to tokenize their assets so they could trade more frequently. I guess that they're looking at trading 24/7 rather than having the downtime. And I think that they're also considering fractional stocks like pegged to Bitcoins, pairing to Bitcoin. So you could get like an eighth of a Facebook stock if you're trading in and out of Bitcoin, stuff like that. It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, this can help a lot with liquidity of assets, and but yeah, I mean it's an obvious use case and direction for the technology. The question is, will it really benefit decentralized platforms, or will everything be centralized in one platform or not? So a platform like D3 would be really great for a stock exchange to do issuance like this, because then you have many partners that are international and across regions, and you don't have to worry as much about.
Well, what would that process be like, right? Now, if a company wanted to go through the process of using D3 to tokenize their securities, like their traditional securities that already exist, right? Like they're already being publicly traded, what would that process be like?
Well, you would have a broker that has to do the issuance, because it is, I mean, it depends a little bit on the jurisdiction that you're doing, but typically you'd have a broker that would, take the stocks that you have now, and then, it would issue a new type of security or derivative based on these. And there, to actually tokenize, some existing security like a stock might be. I don't know how straightforward that would be, because there's other things associated with that, like for example voting rights or things like that. But you can more easily tokenize things like a revenue stream, or even just maybe some dividends that you would get. But to get the full, corporate actions is kind of a little bit of a longer road. I'm skeptical it can be done very easily.
I think the dividend model is going to be real important to the security token success. I think a lot of retail investors are going to look for an incentive for storing their dollar in X, Y, and Z location rather than lending it out for margin trading, which is going to be amazingly super convenient soon. A lot of people are going to be able to make more interest off of just lending their Bitcoin rather than putting things in other places. But I think a lot of these companies, especially like the big corporations right now, the monopolies, are going to want to find a way to get that volume in from the retail investor side, like the people that can't afford one Facebook stock because they don't have that, but they can afford 1/5 or an eighth or a tenth of a Facebook stock, and that's going to add a lot of value to their market cap. So they're incentivized to incentivize us with these, dividends in the form of, I think, would be like utility tokens. But I don't know what your thoughts are on utility tokens being related to the security tokens issuance.
Well, I'm a bit skeptical as to whether the US SEC even, considers utility tokens to be a thing. But
well, I mean, like, it really wouldn't matter if they don't exist in the future, right? Like, there's a lot of things happening at quick pace right now. There's an exponential S curve of social growth when we're looking at things from, like, even from gay marriage to cannabis legalization and stuff, and everything else that's been happening so fast recently. Maybe that it's not too far-fetched to think that, by the ease of being able to go against, like, prohibition doesn't exist because it was just too easy to consume alcohol. It's too easy, it's not as easy to enforce the regulations, so they just get processed out of elimination, right? So I think the ease of this technology's use, where a 5-year-old is going to be able to do a security token for their lemonade stand and have a utility token, for their lemonade. So if you invest in my lemonade stand, you get a utility token. It gets you free lemonade. It's going to be so easy for these kids to do this. They're not going to be able to enforce anything. They're going to be a joke. So why will the SEC even exist when they're going to be going after more 5-year-olds on playgrounds than, anybody else?
Well, I mean, I think that long term you'll have some regulatory clarity similar to what exists in Switzerland.
Well, regulatory clarity is not the same as regulatory enforce, right? They can't enforce it. It's impossible. I could create a DAO and just say, hey, look what I found. I don't have to say I created it. It could just be anonymous. And like, hey, look at this thing I found. I like it a lot. Nobody found it before. And now I look like the founder, but I'm not. I just discovered it. I'm the discoverer.
Yeah, no, that is true. But I mean, for a lot of use cases, though, you don't want to do it completely anonymously.
Well, again, decentralization is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a superpower and a weakness. It is interesting. That's why Bitcoin is where it's at now. I mean, I feel like if Bitcoin had some form of, like, where, what Litecoin had with Charlie Lee, we wouldn't be having this, slacker right now moment where we would already probably be working on this. We'd have rootstock already ready to go. We'd have atomic swaps, and lightning channels would probably be more established. But now we have 34 forks.
Would be better too.
We have so many forks. What's the environment like in Japan, though, for cryptocurrencies? I mean, like, from my perspective, reading articles that seem like they might just be friggin' clickbait, every store in Japan seems to be accepting Bitcoin. The Best Buy of Japan accepts Bitcoin. The Walmart of Best Buy accepts Bitcoin. Every convenience store, and I'm like, really, though? So I'm just curious, is this as common as, like, the mainstream media projects it to be in Japan? Like, is Bitcoin as common as every other payment method?
Short answer is no.
That's what I thought.
But actually, I don't spend a lot of time in Japan nowadays. I travel a lot for business, and in Europe.
Where have you been traveling? Oh, Europe. You just said.
Europe, and I also end up going to Cambodia once a month for business. But anyway, so in Japan, I think that there's a lot of excitement early on about cryptocurrencies. So for some reason, everything has been, Japan's been the focal point of all of this for a long time. There's, Satoshi Nakamoto, Japanese name. Mt. Gox was here. You had people like Roger Ver, a lot of the thought leaders were here for a while. But then after some of the hacks, you know, first Mt. Gox and then CoinCheck, and it really kind of put a freeze on a lot of, I guess, the excitement about things. And unfortunately, a lot of, you know, crypto wasn't used as a payment method here. It was more just a form of speculation. So there are some stores that take it, but it's really, really rare.
Well, Bitcoin has that very unique problem where nobody wants to spend it because they keep thinking it's going to keep going up, and then when it goes down, they think it'll bounce back up. So there's like nobody ever wants to spend Bitcoin. They want to make more fiat from it, and that's about it. But if they spended it and used it, they would have more of it. It would go up.
Yeah, that's a great segue into what I wanted to talk about tonight, which is, yeah, one of the reasons is because Bitcoin is, you know, it's really a deflationary economy, and there's a lot of economic, I guess, structural problems in the Bitcoin economy. So Bitcoin's very interesting, and as a payment system that's unstoppable, it's quite profound. And maybe even as a store of value, it's interesting because it is long-term deflationary. So maybe maybe if there's some fundamental value there that can you know, keep the value over time or even go up. But it's not really an economic system. You need to have some kind of rational economic model or monetary policy in order to have you know, really something that people can use in their daily life as, you know, money or moneyness. So that's what we're trying to solve with Sora. So Sora means sky, and our idea really is, just like, you know, the sky covers the whole world, and everywhere you go you can see the sky. We want to create the same type of kind of world economic system. So our motto right now is one world, one economy. And the idea is that we create what I call a decentralized autonomous economy. It's kind of like a DAO, but whereas the DAO was an investment fund where people invest money and speculate on different investments, this is actually a token that you decentralize the decision-making part of the creation of. So so you don't want infinite inflation. I mean, like totally unbounded inflation. Instead, what you want is every year, you know, some constant amount of inflation that's predictable. And so within that, you know, amount of inflation that you can have, so the new tokens that you are creating, you want to create these tokens as much as possible for productive use. So productive from a GDP standpoint. So creation of new goods or services is the short answer. Now, this is something that central banks already do in managing a lot of the economies. But you don't want to centralize this decision. There's a great moral hazard in that. Instead, our idea is you decentralize it. And so you decentralize it by giving everyone voting rights to create just a small amount of the tokens that you can create every year. So like an example would be, if we can create 500 tokens, you know, I would have like 200 votes. So I can create 200 tokens, you would have 300. So the two of us can, you know, together decide, how do we create these 500 tokens? What projects do we give them to? So the idea is we just have many people propose goods and services, and then people vote on, you know, oh, this good or new type of good will get 300 tokens. Let's vote to create these 300 tokens and give them to this project.
Now, what would that project do with those tokens, though? Like, I'm just curious, what's the use case for them or the utility of that token? Why would I want that token? What can I do with it as a developer or as an employee for this DAO?
Okay, so there's two answers depending on the time scale. Obviously, from a long-term standpoint, we would say that, you know, you have a nice economy and you can use the tokens to you know, pay your employees to build something or to buy some raw materials. But in the short term, you obviously need some kind of fiat currency. Most people don't work for magic internet money. Some people do, which is nice. But So what you have to do, you would take this allocation of tokens and then, sell it, to in some secondary market, possibly, to raise fiat currency that you would then build something. Um, but we do have some examples of projects that are already, starting to build things, even before we've launched. So one of the projects is vIRL. This is a wine company. So it's actually a very very
Wine.
nice story. Well, I mean, wine is something tangible, and it's something that a lot of us can relate to or drink. But
Well, yeah, I mean,
this,
even in a bear market or a depression, alcohol is one of the most profitable investments you'd make.
but here, like the idea is you take organic California-grown Pinot Noir grapes, and they're handpicked under the full moon. So they did this back in last October, and then they fermented the wine, and it's actually sparkling wine. So it's not a traditional method; it's a modern method using modern technology. It's forced carbonated. They actually create 5,000 bottles and then 6,000 cans. So the cans are like your
Are they
well, the can.
tokenized?
They're not tokenized.
Be so cool.
um, but they're like Red Bull cans, right? But with sparkling red wine in it. But the cool thing is, like, this is yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, next time for your future show, we'll have to give you some wine.
Oh, definitely.
Maybe actually, when the wine goes on sale, I think we should do this again with the guys.
Would
So
I be
the
able to
people,
buy it with crypto?
yeah. So that's the thing. So the way that it contributes to the Sora economy is that you can use the XOR. Well, our currency is called, or token is called XOR. You can use XOR to buy the wine at discount compared to fiat.
That's the incentive right there. Okay.
So that's the idea, and this is just a simple example. But let's say you have 10,000 projects like this. 10,000 new products that are being built, and you can see that there's a lot of potential. Just from a theoretical standpoint. So every day, Bitcoin is mining about $10 million worth of new Bitcoin, giving it giving it only to miners. So our idea is, instead of giving it to just one asset or actor in the economy, instead you should give it, to create new goods and services. So if Bitcoin was actually giving all the new Bitcoins to like stores who accepted Bitcoin, or to
People that
farmers who,
contribute, yeah.
yeah, like let's say there's a farmer of some grapes or something who accepts Bitcoin instead. So that's the kind of use case that would really give you high growth. That's the theory of what we're doing. So it's called Sora. It's a decentralized autonomous economy, a DAE as we call it. It's
I dig it. I mean, I can see the concept. It's almost like working for a temp agency that has all the businesses that go through the temp agency basically have like a in-house credit system that, they pay in. And this sort of happens in a traditional sense right now with like Amazon gift cards. A lot of companies have these developers that are willing to work for Amazon gift cards because it's easier for companies in the US and other countries to pay people in Amazon gift cards rather than use fiat exchanges and currency exchanges and wire transfers for like $20. I mean, that's all you really got paid this week. So is it really worth it? So there are other, companies that already do this in a centralized means, but they're using, like I said, Amazon gift cards and shit like that. And people would argue, oh, what about all the steps it would take? Like, how do I pay my rent out of this economy's token?
Well, Binance employees, I think CZ tweeted that a majority of the employees accept at least part of their salary in BNB tokens. So
Well, they made 10% this month.
yeah, it's a good deal. I wish I was paid in BNB tokens, but
Well, it depends on the tax scenario, right? I don't like that whole first in, first out scenario at all.
mhm.
Like if you bought your first Bitcoin at $100 and you sold it at 20,000, but you bought a Bitcoin at 19,000 the day before, they're gonna take into consideration the gains from the $100 Bitcoin up. And I never. That's the private key I still held. I never actually even moved that Bitcoin. But first in, first out.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, room for, I don't know, regulatory improvements in the space. But it's, no, things have been coming together pretty well, I think. A lot of companies have been building a lot of things. We, we haven't stopped building things. Well, we were never really part of, the cryptocurrency boom. We were always, doing enterprise work, and really our foray into tokenomics with Sora is really our first thing that we're doing with a public type of token.
So who's Sora's end user, right? Like who are you marketing towards right now for Sora.org as your demo? Like who would be the perfect customer for you guys? Like let them know who you are and why you're the option that they need.
Well, there's many types of actors that are needed in an economy. So there's producers and then consumers, and then you need people to actually, install the app that we're creating to do the voting of how do you distribute the newly created tokens. So it's really like all these different people together should build this. So that's part of the hard thing about marketing a project like this, because a lot of it's heavy on the theory, and people don't understand economics, and then B, most people in this space just really want to make money fast, and if they don't have, like, people don't even read articles, they just look at headlines and they go buy a token or something, right? So it's really hard to know like how much should we actually target traditional crypto communities versus like trying to target the mainstream. Our basic sense. Well, our basic model is, we have all these projects like Vincero, and D3 is actually one of the projects that is planned to raise some of the funding on this platform. And the idea really is that all these different projects who get a token allocation, they should go out and, help like do their own marketing for their own service, and then we'll have like a secondary benefit from that as a whole. So yeah, it's kind of the idea, and I think it's a really simple idea. I'm surprised no one's done it before, but up until now, people really just been focusing on investments and really what are really traditional securities, like the original DAO. But we're like, no, we don't want to go after the money game. We want to actually create a real economy that you would want to live in. So you wouldn't want to live in an economy that's always deflationary. You want to live in an economy where you get new tokens created, but for productive uses. So you get something new from it, and then that expands the economic pie. And in theory, it should work out splendidly.
Yeah, but then we have human element, right? Everything's great on paper until you add people. And that's where I would start to worry about the actually participation in voting, right? And then you have the incentive to vote on others' behalfs, and it starts to get real like weird when you think about it. When I think about like even master nodes and things like that, or even how Steam and things have like the ability to vote. There's so many ways to game that by incentivizing people to vote for you, and you'd be able to reward them with something X, Y, and Z in behalf of that. And because of the open source ledger, you can track the people that have actually participated in your vote, so you can reward them. So there's just, I don't know, I see a lot of ways that decentralizing through voting is actually also creating a means of centralization through incentive without creating a secondary market. It's actually in the ecosystem itself.
Yeah, so that's a fair point. I should point out that a few decades ago, Milton Friedman basically said that computer programs should run the economy. And I think in the future, you'll be able to have machine learning algorithms that could do much better at making decisions than people. But until then, it's important to kind of, decentralize at least some of the voting rights. So we kind of try to solve the problem that you just mentioned by giving people. It's not one person, one vote. It's a voting system where different people get different votes, and the votes that you get are based on reputation. So, and the reputation is calculated by mainly how well the success of the projects that you vote for. So, if you vote for a project and give it an allocation of newly created tokens, and the project does fabulously well, then your reputation should go up, and you should get more votes in the
What's the
future.
catalyst for a project doing well or not?
So, yeah, no, that's also a very good question. There's many ways that you can potentially look at the success of a project. It's it's hard to do this in a completely decentralized way.
Right.
So, what the strategy that we're doing this now for decentralization is every quarter take a statistically significant sample of people from the with a high enough statistical power from the community, and then randomly ask them like what their thoughts are on the project. So basically give them a survey and then most people will say it gets out of here, I'm not going to answer, but we'll ask enough people so that you get enough of an opinion to kind of know, how does the community see this project? Like, do they even know about the project?
Yeah, you get the crowdsourced information and try to get the consensus of the overall investors.
Yeah, that's really the best you can do in a completely decentralized way. Um, Long term, if we, like, let's say we're widely successful and everyone in the world used this platform, what I envision would be more of like geographically regional hubs, where you kind of split things up by regions a little bit more. Obviously, everyone uses the same token, but the voting rights and the reputation calculation should be a bit more um, regional.
I wanted to touch on the reputation just a little bit because even Steam ran into that problem where the reputation becomes sort of like its own central point of failure, or like an echo chamber in a sense. But I see kind of what you're going with the sort of, I would say, maybe proof of success that like you were going with the projects that kind of maybe helps establish the reputation, but still a larger reputation may be able to censor something, right? So if a company submits a proposal that wants to maybe compete with my project, maybe I'm incentivized to try to vote against it, right? Because I don't want a competition in the ecosystem. How do we prevent monopolies in this environment of like reputation-based voting?
Well, yeah, no, that's a great question as well, and it's also something that I thought about quite a lot. And what's interesting is that if you look at a strategy central banks often use in guiding or have used historically in guiding the creation of money, um, the ones who are successful at it really targeted market segments, like, for example, steel industry or car industry. They wouldn't necessarily favor one company over another. And really, that's something that I think will naturally occur, just spread over the whole world of users. If you average everything out, people will, there won't be a significant bias. And because it's not a yes or no vote, it's really an allocation. As long as there's enough people in the world who think that your idea is good enough where you deserve an allocation of these new tokens, then people will vote. So there's really, I mean, obviously they worry about their own reputation. Is the project going to be a success or not?
Well, and we also have to worry about the lack of employees, right? Like right now, there's not many blockchain developers, and in an ecosystem like this, I'm sure there will be a piranha fest of trying to grab people to contribute to your projects.
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of developers in the world, and a lot of them are switching into the blockchain
A lot.
space. So recently, I think, well, for example, Tron is very well known nowadays because they did like a hackathon competition.
And they bought every Ethereum and EOS developer they could.
Well, it's a reasonable strategy, but it also has had the effect of expanding the number of developers in this space, which is only a good thing because developers are very important. They create, they create everything that we use. So.
And there's a huge incentive to become a developer in this space. I think the minimum income's at least six figures a month. At least.
I'm not sure what projects that is in a bear market
No,
like
I
this.
meant like institutional companies, like,
Okay.
yeah, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, these companies institutionally are hungry for, knowledgeable blockchain developers. I'm not talking about, like the ICO companies. I meant more in like the traditional, corporate sense that their hiring incentive is huge right now for credible blockchain developers because there aren't many. And then the government also, they're trying to hire some blockchain developers because they don't understand the technology enough to know what is enforceable or not, to know what regulations they can or not even create because they don't even know if they can impose them or not.
Mm. I know that FINMA in Switzerland hired many technical people to help, review a lot of the applications that they're getting. And yeah, there's a talent shortage all over, but um, I think not as bad as it was because maybe I'm seeing the wrong side, but it seemed more like at the end of 2017, in the big boom, like there's just so much craziness going around
Yeah.
that it was hard to find anyone.
Yeah, it's true. I wanted to touch on a little bit about the decentralized economy and maybe bring it a little bit towards the bounty systems that exist right now. And a lot of people don't approve of these, these as a means of employment, right? Like for a basic employment business model, because there's a lot of people that would compete for the jobs and they would do work, but they wouldn't get hired. So there's, work being done, but the more popular contributors are always selected. Like when you look at a reward or bounty system, 100 people can contribute to a bounty, but only one person or maybe three people win, and there's different payments for each place. But 97 people or so just didn't make the cut, so their work goes unpaid, and this could go
Mm.
on for ever. So like, I'm just curious, is this something that you could see being sustainable if we do move more towards this digital economy where there aren't as many jobs in the physical world because we have the Internet of Thing devices, basically like, the machines at McDonald's that are the cashier's jobs now. Do you see a way that this could work out, or is it something that may just be niche? Maybe this doesn't have to be a blanket economy, model.
Well, I really hope that projects like Sora can help different corporations and sectors to collaborate more. Because my own personal philosophy is that we're already in competition with nature. I mean, I live in Japan a lot of the year, and there's a lot of natural disasters. There's over 100 active volcanoes in this country. Um,
Over 100?
but
What?
really, it's
How is your anxiety not through the roof right now?
well, it's we don't have earthquakes every day. I mean, like that you can feel. Um, but really, I mean, we're up against a lot of problems of nature, and we should be collaborating more. One of the problems with globalization is that no matter where you are in the world, you're actually competing against everyone. Is really how it
Yeah,
feels.
that's true.
And
Instead of just competing with your local competition, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So if you make, like, let's say you make socks, okay, alpaca socks. You could be doing it in the rural countryside, and you would be dominating your local market. But then, oh, Amazon comes, and then everyone can buy alpaca socks from anywhere. So it's a it's something that I think human societies really need to reorganize around. And the idea really about Sora was that you could create new tokens in a way such that there's you could fund things that you wouldn't fund normally.
Well, this is being done traditionally right now in Canada, right?
Well, which way do you mean?
They're creating a token. It's a digital currency that the I guess they call it a parliament or province, the province of Alberta. They created the Alberta dollar. It's a digital dollar that they give to people that spend money in Alberta. So if you're an employee and you live in a resident in Alberta, to incentivize you to shop locally, they actually give you this token reward as a loyalty point for shopping and spending money back in house. Because so much money was leaving the province, it was a drain. There wasn't people spending money in local businesses. Local businesses were going down. Nobody was opening another local business. So they had to figure out a incentive to keep the employees spending the money in the same city that they live in, instead of shopping online and spending the money out and, you know, globalizing that economy, because the global economy wasn't pouring back in at the same volume. So it's really interesting to see that you're doing this, considering that there's a fucking country that is also trying to do this, but in a centralized means.
Well, we have that in Japan as well. So different localities can create their own local currency, and these are typically in the form of some kind of, you know, like bill or ticket that you can then spend it at certain, like, well, mini local shops.
Like a coupon, right?
Yeah, and it gives you some bonus, right? So it's the same type of idea. And again, it's this, you know, wave against you know, globalized competition. So really what we need is a globalized collaborative scheme where, you know, people, instead of just competing, you know, they're trying to help each other to go up. And, you know, if you have like 5 different wine companies, I would hope that if you had 5 different wine companies in the Sora economy, that instead of just competing with each other, that they would help each other build up.
Right. You're creating a digital think tank, an incubator in a sense, right? Where people can pick in, you know, kind of help. Like if I'm lacking in one place, I could ask another for help through their, you know, digital economy where they hired X, Y, and Z for that. And I could reach out as well. And I see that, you know, in a lot of places I visited in 2018, as far as like, you know, these incubators go, you see more progress in collaboration than trying to do everything under one umbrella in-house, where one company trying to do their supply chain, they're trying to do their token issuance, they're trying to do the security management, and they're so spread thin they can't manage anything at full capacity. And the incentive is out there to do a lot of collaboration, but again, I also think that they're worried a lot about, you know, the in-house biasness, right? Like if you worked for this company and, you know, maybe you work for that wine company and I hire you to work for me, you know, you might be more incentivized to do a better job for them than you are for me because you're invested in them. So you have an incentive for me to fail. Like that's in everything though. There's no way to change that in even any business model. Like the best way to destroy something is from the inside, says SLC Punk.
Well, it's good to have some competition, but it should be bounded. And really, I think you still need the profit motive, but it should be, you know, bounded as well. And
well, the reputation-based system kind of disincentivizes bad acting as well.
One would hope so. And actually, in our well, our white paper is going to be released fairly shortly. But in that, we talk a lot about the referendum system of governance. So all the parameters of the system really can be changed by referendum. So the idea is that, you know, even if the first, you know, settings are not maybe 100%, you know, or even if the future society changes, or the, you know, we can still adapt and evolve. And my hope is that it can become really a platform where people can really be empowered to create new things, like for example this wine project, or D3, or, you know, other types of projects that are in the pipeline. Yeah, there's actually a lot of really cool projects that I can't all talk about today, but maybe in the future we can get some big guys on here to talk. And
yeah, you have the link, man. My podcast is pretty open source. Anybody can come on. I don't charge anybody anything, and everybody's welcome. I enjoy talking to anybody and everybody, man. I really do. And I like this concept of a decentralized economy, man. It's something I've always thought about, but like I've mentioned some of like my tinfoil hat theories that worry me about it. But then again, that's nothing that can be done even in the traditional industries. It's just every I would say every evolution has its, yin and yang, give and take, and you have to outweigh the risk reward to it. And like you were mentioning with the problems that a global economy does provide, we've seen the risk outweigh the reward, and we have to start to figure out how do we balance those scales by incentivizing the keeping things more locally as well as globalizing, and it's difficult.
Yeah, well, I think that this is a way for normal people to make a lot of decisions about how new tokens are created, and so this can help, I guess, in a way, price in a lot of externalities, like things like environmental degradation that normal companies don't consider in their business model because they're not part of the profit equation. But if you live in some place, you sure you definitely care about environmental degradation. So we have to be careful because in a few decades there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish if we don't change the course. So
It's I think we're at the irreparable damage state, man. I don't know how much we can do. I watched a documentary on the river Gandhi, I think it was in India, and
the Ganges River.
Genji River. Oh shit, bro, my fucking heart breaks for that river, dude. So broken. $4 billion spent and not a damn drop of water has been filtered, cleaned. Nothing. It breaks my heart. And then you see the thing in the ocean, like, what do they call it? The seventh continent or something like that? It's like the size of Australia.
Patch. Yeah.
That's another one that scares the crap out of me. And they do a
Twice
deep dive, and they look under, and there's fish eating the plastic, and then there's bigger fish eating the fish that ate the plastic. I don't know, man. I don't even eat seafood anymore, man, at all. You might as well chew on a thermometer if you're gonna have a fish stick. What are your thoughts on buying products online with crypto? And I would try to tie this into that decentralized economy, right? With the wine company that you have. What would be that, incentive for buying products online with crypto as opposed to maybe buying those products online with Visa or other means?
Okay, so in Sora, we put a lot of thought into this because, we want to create a lot of goods and products. So the wine, of course, will be something that you can buy online. With XOR, the currency, or the token we're building. It's not really a currency, it's more of a utility token. But in this case, the benefit of using the token would be that you can get some cash back, kind of. So we would like that type of scheme. So what we have is 1% of the tokens that are created, they go to different stores that accept XOR, and then 1% are given to people who shop at those stores. So it's kind of like,
Well, I mean, American Express has the same business model, right? If I have like their American Express Club card and I use them, I'm incentivized to use that card because I get a kickback.
Yeah, the kickback scheme is the only really logical way that I could think of.
Well, I mean, I guess the kickback could be larger considering the transaction fee would be significantly lower. I mean, card payment processors charge 3 to 5% just to, clear a transaction that the business has to pay for. So they could pass on half of that savings to the customer easily.
Yeah, so I think that it'll make things a little bit cheaper around the world. One concern, though, is you lose, I guess, some status. So like if you have a cool credit card or something, you can whip it out, put it down, and everyone thinks,
maybe,
wow, look at that cool guy.
Well, there's some cool cards and stuff. I have a crypto. I don't have my wallet near me, but I have a couple cool crypto cards. And PondiX or PundiX, however you want to say it, they're doing some cool things. I got a Tangem card. It uses like NFC, so if I were to, it could let me do like a tap and pay kind of scenario. But the NFC actually taps to the back of my phone. I put in my PIN, then I scan your address and do a send. So my NFC card's sort of like cold storage. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of things that I play around with in this space that, like, as you're saying, I could see all being implemented. But you would have that status. You would have that cool status of the card.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've looked at is QR code payments on mobile because it is a pretty easy way to do things, especially with some of the standardization with MCO. But it's hard to really make it cool, you know?
I think the whole QR code scanning thing is going to be gone before we ever see mass adoption. It has to go straight tap and pay. We just
Don't
need
tell the
more
Chinese.
NFC. We need more NFC communications. Every business has a tap and pay terminal. All we have to do is update their software, and we can tap our Android device or iOS device. It'll open up one of our Android wallets or iOS wallets, and we could interact with, sending cryptocurrencies as conveniently as it would be to tap and pay and use any other form of payment. I think the QR code thing is what's really holding crypto back. I mean, look at it in a traditional sense. Who uses QR codes? It was like the biggest flop in technological advancement. Nobody uses it. Everything I buy has a little QR code on the can or on whatever, but who scans them? Who uses it? Nobody uses it.
Well, in China they're really quite popular though. So things like like WeChat Pay and things like that. But I think that it misses a lot of the cool factor.
Nobody's gonna scan this and send me Bitcoin. Prove me wrong.
Is that a real
Internet.
Bitcoin address?
Yeah, this is my Bitcoin address. And so is this.
Oh, wow. But you seem to like QR codes.
No, that's the problem. Nobody uses them. I need to get the NFC chip so when people tap their phone to my arm, it pre-populates my Bitcoin address text field.
Yeah, it's funny you had mentioned that because we actually put a lot of effort into researching a lot of payments from implantable chips. And
what was
there's
your
actually
discoveries? Ooh, this is awesome.
there's a really cool company that makes chips that are the size of a grain of sand, like much smaller than like the big
The ones that are just like rice-sized.
Well, those have a lithium battery usually, and that takes up a lot of the space. But this company in California, they actually use, small quartz crystal or some kind of crystal that is piezoelectric. So it generates power from sound waves, which is quite cool. And there's a cool paper that was published. It's called like Neural Dust or something, and that was really. Something I think that technology in the future could have a lot of potential. I don't know if it's been improved for humans or what the status is, but it's something that I could see being maybe something like that could be cool. That being said, I've talked to people about implantable chips. They get a bit squeamish, but I did lots of research and thinking about the topic for about a year, and my conclusion is that the only safe way to do payments without external devices to implant a chip, because you don't want to use biometrics, like things like eyes or fingerprints.
Well, that would be your 2FA, right? You would tap with your chip,
Exactly,
and then you would put down your fingerprint. And I would imagine by that time, and this is, a lot of people don't realize this, but this is already pretty basic, that a lot of fingerprint scanners actually check for a pulse to make sure that that thumb wasn't cut off or you aren't dead. This is like, the first thing people will say is, what if somebody cuts off your thumb? Well, by default, almost every thumbprint scanner, even in a banking traditional, it's checking for a pulse. And it's not going to be far from that technology being implemented to your mobile device. So your phone wants to make sure that you can tap that NFC chip, then put down your fingerprint to make sure that you can send that transaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Well, any kind of biometric could be thought of as something like a username, not a password. On Apple's website, I was looking at the other day, it said your face is your password or something like that, and it's not. You don't want to use any kind of biometric as a password. But some stuff like that could kind of have the cool factor because it is it's new, and actually implanting a chip could be really quite useful for things other than payments as well. Imagine doing like a virus scan every time you pay, like to see like, do you have malaria, do you have AIDS, like different things like that. If you have something inside the body, it could potentially be overloaded to do other tasks than just
well, what about having malware installed? Going to a doorknob. You go to a doorknob, you touch the doorknob, and it installed malware onto your NFC. That's like one of the things, again, with my tinfoil hat just scares the crap out of me about. But I mean, it's something that I've considered after speaking to Brock Pierce. We were talking about the implants, and the first thing he kind of brought up was like, yeah, but what, you're gonna get a virus in your NFC chip, and you're gonna spread that to your house when you start to unlock your door, and then when you unlock your computer, and it's gonna be because like I have a hardware wallet. This hardware wallet, I have tons of hardware wallets, but they all need updates every month because of exploits. So I'm gonna have to update my chip or physically update the actual hardware XYZ amount of times a year because of bad actors. So I mean, how likely is it ever to be something? You know what I mean? Like, what is the likelihood?
Well, I mean, maybe you need something more resilient, like what the body has, because your body already is fairly resilient to things like viruses, but you still get sick occasionally. That's another thing that I think we really have to do.
Antivirus.
Well, one thing I think we have to come together as humanity and work on is, improving our design, not just the design of technology. There's a lot of bugs in our programming, and I mean genetic programming, that I think people get squeamish thinking about it, but it's really the logical conclusion. In Zen, there's a saying: if you see a weed, pick it, and you shouldn't be afraid about fixing things that are broken.
Damn, man, that is actually a good note to end on, bro. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find you on the internet and a little elevator pitch about what you're doing with Sora.org?
Okay, so you can find us on Sora.org. We have a Telegram chat, Sora.org/chat. Sora is SORA, and we're a decentralized autonomous economy. We want to put the power of creation of new tokens into your hands and use it for good.
Yeah, guys, stop buying crypto and start earning crypto and contribute to the economy. Check out Sora.org. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's start a public conversation about Sora.org. And don't forget to pound that thumbs up button, click subscribe, flick the alert bell, and have a day.
Thanks.